Hi, my name is Ava, and yesterday morning I watched strangers carry my life into cardboard. The movers did not look at me. They followed orders like metronomes, box after box, a rhythm that sounded like eviction. My stepmother stood on the porch with a porcelain smile, one hand swirling a cup of tea, the other pointing to what used to be my room. "You are not family," she said, as if the words were a key that could lock every door at once. Her two children, glossy with satisfaction, filmed everything on their phones. They said the house, the cars, the company shares, all of it belongs to us now. They said my father wanted it this way. They said I should take my thrift store suitcase and go. The sun was cruelly beautiful. The exact kind of blue sky my father loved for Sunday drives. I kept thinking about the last voicemail he left me, his voice soft with the smile I could always hear. "Dinner soon, kiddo." I want to talk about the future. By the time I pressed play again, the movers were lifting the cedar box that holds his watch collection. My stepmother glanced at it with the casualness of a person choosing a dessert. She laughed and told me to stop making everything dramatic. She said real family carries real weight. She said I had been a guest in this home from the beginning. My hands would not stop shaking. If you have ever been told you do not belong in a place that holds your memories, you know how the air changes. The doorframe where my height marks still sit in pencil. The coffee stain I could never scrub out of the stair carpet. The corner of the kitchen where my father taught me how to balance a checkbook while the soup simmered. A home holds 1,000 quiet proofs that you existed there. And yet, with one sentence, she tried to rewrite every wall. I asked for time to say goodbye to my father's study. She called it manipulation. Her son checked his watch and smirked. Her daughter asked me to sign a receipt that said I had removed all my property. When I refused, they took a selfie, caption idea. The daughter said, "Finally cleaning house." I tasted metal in my mouth, rage, fear, grief, all of it. I wanted to shout that my father raised me alone. Before she arrived, I wanted to pull every file from the drawers and scatter them like confetti. Instead, I picked up the one thing they had ignored. A heavy envelope tucked behind a row of law textbooks, the kind of envelope that carries a seal that should never be broken outside the right room. I slid the envelope into my bag. It felt like a heartbeat. My stepmother told me to leave my keys on the console. I placed them down. They rang on the wood like small bells. She leaned close and whispered that some people are born on the guest list and some people wait outside. Then she turned her back to me. Her children clapped quietly. Have you ever been applauded for losing everything and felt the applause sharpen into a promise inside you? I walked to the curb with my suitcase and that sealed envelope. A neighbor looked away. The cold went through my jacket and found every bone. I called the number on the front of the envelope, the lawyer my father always trusted. He picked up on the second ring. "Bring it here," he said, "now." My stepmother's laughter floated down the driveway. She told the movers to be careful with the painting in the dining room. She told her children to start choosing rooms. She told me goodbye without turning around. Would you forgive or fight if someone erased your name from your own life? What would you do if the only person who believed in you was gone, and the only thing he left behind was a silence sealed with wax? I did not know it yet, but that silence was about to speak louder than any accusation. And when it did, every person who had just laughed would hear my father's voice instead of mine. The lawyer's office smelled faintly of leather and dust, the kind of place where time seemed to stand still. Tall windows let in strips of gray afternoon light that cut across shelves lined with bound volumes, their gold lettering dulled by decades. I sat on a chair that felt too big for me, my suitcase at my feet like an accusation. Every tick of the grandfather clock in the corner pressed into my chest, reminding me that my father was no longer here to fill this room with his voice. The lawyer, Mr. Whitaker adjusted his glasses as if preparing to carry the weight of someone else's destiny. His desk was wide and orderly, yet on the center of it sat one thing out of place: the sealed envelope I had brought from my father as study. The wax seal gleamed red in the filtered light, unbroken, defiant. I could almost hear my stepmother's laughter echoing in contrast to the heavy silence here. Outside the door, the world carried on as if nothing had shifted. But inside this office, everything felt fragile. I traced the wood grain on the armrest, trying to hold onto something real. I remembered the scent of my father's cologne that used to linger in the hallways at home, the clink of his coffee spoon against his favorite porcelain cup, the sound of him whistling along to the radio when he thought no one was listening. Those details swelled inside me, fighting against the emptiness my stepmother's words had carved out. "You are not family." The curtains moved gently in the draft, like a slow breath. I noticed the tiny crack in the corner of a window pane, spidering outward, as if even the glass could not bear the pressure of secrets held too long. My reflection looked back at me, pale and worn, a stranger in the place where my father once made every decision that shaped our lives. "Mr. Whitaker cleared his throat softly and said that my father trusted him to guard the truth until the right moment. His voice was calm but grave, carrying a weight I was not sure I was strong enough to lift. My hands trembled on my lap. I thought of the dining table back home, now crowded with my stepmother's china instead of my father's papers. I thought of the laughter of her children echoing in the hallway I used to run through as a little girl. The office smelled not only of dust, but of inevitability. The clock's hands kept moving, relentless, toward a revelation that could not be stopped. I knew that whatever lay inside that envelope would redraw the lines of family and belonging. I was terrified. But beneath the terror, there was a flicker of something else, the stubborn, quiet hope that my father had not abandoned me after all. Would you dare to believe in hope when everyone around you insists you are already defeated? Would you sit in that chair, trembling but unyielding, waiting for words that could either restore everything or take away even the last pieces of yourself? The door to the lawyer's office opened with a sharp click, and the air shifted. My stepmother walked in as if she owned the very floor beneath her shoes. Her perfume arrived before she did, a heavy sweetness that clung to the room like smoke. Behind her trailed her two children, both smiling as if this were a celebration rather than a reading of my father's will. They did not sit quietly. They sprawled across the chairs, crossed their legs, and glanced at me with the smugness of victors waiting for the official announcement of their triumph. "You should not be here," my stepmother said, her voice smooth and rehearsed. "This is a family matter." She let the word family linger in the air like a knife. I felt it slice through me, cold and merciless stepmother. Whitaker straightened in his seat. "Miss Aver has every right to be present." His tone was firm, but I could sense the tension behind it. My stepmother laughed softly, as though the idea itself was absurd. She was never truly part of us. My husband only kept her around out of pity. Her son leaned forward and added, "You're just a guest who overstayed her welcome." Her daughter tapped her phone screen, recording the moment like it was a comedy skit. I wanted to speak, but my throat felt bound. My father's voice echoed faintly in my memory, "You belong, kiddo." But here, in this room, their words pressed against me until I could barely breathe. The lawyer placed a hand on the sealed envelope. At once, their confidence seemed to flare into anger. "Why waste time?" my stepmother said sharply. "Read it aloud so we can move forward. The estate is ours. That is what he promised me. That is what he wanted." Her children smirked, their eyes sliding toward me as if daring me to protest. My hands curled into fists in my lap. The humiliation burned. I thought of the boxes being carried out of the house, the laughter that followed me down the driveway. I thought of the countless times I had been told I was less, that I was only tolerated. Each memory stacked itself like stones on my chest. I whispered, almost to myself, This was my father's home too. Her daughter burst into a laugh. Was dot past tense? You should learn to move on. Have you ever felt the whole world conspire to erase you in a single breath? To sit surrounded by faces that insist you are nothing, while every corner of your heart screams that you are everything they deny? In that moment, I wanted to stand, to shout, to tear through their lies. But the lawyer's hand remained firm on the envelope, and his eyes met mine with a quiet signal. Wait. Let the truth speak for itself. So I stayed silent, trembling but unbroken, while their insults piled higher. A wall meant to shut me out forever. The silence in that office dragged me back into years that I had tried to bury. Each wound, each slight, each whispered dismissal rose from the shadows of memory, demanding to be seen again. I remembered my 12th birthday. My father had brought home a cake with my name written in neat blue frosting. He sang louder than anyone, his clapping offbeat but full of love. That was the first year my stepmother had entered our lives. She smiled warmly in front of him. But when no one else was watching, she leaned close and whispered into my ear, "Enjoy this while you can. He will realize soon enough that you are nothing but a burden." That night, as I lay awake, I heard her laugh softly in the hallway as if cruelty itself amused her. I remembered the graduation photo. My father stood proudly beside me with his arm draped over my shoulder, his smile unshakable. Yet when the framed portrait arrived weeks later, I was gone. Cropped out. My stepmother had ordered the edit herself, claiming it looked cleaner. She hung that version in the living room for every guest to see. A smiling family of 4, polished and perfect, with no trace of the daughter who had been there all along. I remembered staying up until dawn to help her son polish a business presentation. He played games while I wrote notes, refined slides, and rehearsed his lines with him. He won first place, stood on a stage in a shining suit, and thanked everyone but me. My stepmother's applause thundered from the front row as she declared that her children were destined for greatness. I sat alone at the back, invisible. There were smaller cruelties too. She corrected my posture at dinner as if I were an unwanted guest. Her daughter locked the bathroom door while I stood waiting outside. She rarely called me by name. To her, I was only his girl, a reminder that I did not truly belong. Each moment stacked on the last, a wall of injustice too high to climb. Through it all, my father tried to shield me in quiet ways. Sometimes he would squeeze my hand beneath the table when her words cut deep. Sometimes he would leave a note on my desk that said, "Proud of you, Keto," beside a small gift. He noticed that he cared. But even he could not fully stop the tide rising against me. And now, with him gone, they believed nothing stood in their way. My stepmother and her children carried themselves as if the war was already over. Yet the sealed envelope on the lawyer's desk pulsed with a truth I could almost feel. My father had known, he had seen, and perhaps he had left behind one final act of protection. Would you carry such injustice in silence until it hollowed you out? Or would you wait for the single moment when the truth could burn it all to ash? Mr. Whitaker slid the sealed envelope closer, his fingertips brushing against the wax like it was sacred. The room went quiet except for the steady tick of the grandfather clock. My stepmother leaned forward in her chair, her smile thin and dangerous. Her children exchanged glances, certain that the paper inside would confirm what they already believed, that I was nothing, that they had won. But Whitaker's eyes never left mine. "Your father was deliberate in everything he did," he said. "He prepared this document with great care. He asked me to guard it until the day came when there could be no more doubt." My heart pounded so loudly I could hear it in my ears. For a moment, the walls of the office blurred, and all I could see was the red seal gleaming in the dim light. I remembered the last dinner with my father, the way he had looked across the table at me with a softness in his eyes. He had spoken of the future, promising that we would talk soon. I had thought he meant college, or work, or maybe the vacation he always dreamed of taking. But perhaps he meant this. Perhaps he was preparing me for the storm he knew would follow after he was gone. "Open it," my stepmother demanded. Her voice cracked with impatience. She tried to laugh, but the sound wavered. We all know what it says. For the first time, I noticed the faint tremor in her hands as she smoothed her skirt. Her children sat straighter now, less certain than before. The lawyer took a silver letter opener from his drawer and cut through the wax with a slow, deliberate movement. The sound was small, but to me it felt like thunder splitting the sky. As the paper unfolded, the air in the room seemed to thicken. I clenched my fists in my lap, bracing myself. Every memory of being erased, every cruel word, every stolen moment of belonging pressed against me like waves about to crash. Yet beneath it all, a spark flickered. My father's voice echoed inside me, "Trust me, kiddo." I lifted my chin, studying myself for what was to come. This was no longer just about inheritance. It was about truth, about belonging, about whether the years of cruelty would stand unchallenged or finally collapse under the weight of my father as final words. Would you dare to believe in justice at the very moment your enemies are waiting for your defeat? Would you let yourself hope when everything you loved had already been taken from you? The lawyer unfolded the document, his voice steady as he began to read. The words echoed in that quiet room, each syllable carving through the arrogance that had filled the air moments before. My stepmother leaned forward, her painted smile trembling as if she could bend the truth by will alone. Her children held their phones ready, prepared to capture their victory. Then came the line that silenced everything. I, Richard Hale, leave the whole of my estate, including the house, company shares, and assets, to my daughter Ava Hale, my only heir. The words struck like lightning. My stepmother's teacup slipped from her hand and shattered on the floor, the sound sharp and final. Her son's smug expression vanished as if someone had ripped the mask from his face. Her daughter lowered her phone slowly, her hands shaking too hard to hold it steady. I sat frozen, the words washing over me in waves I could hardly process. For so long I had been told I was nothing, a guest, an intruder. Yet here, in black ink sealed by my father's hand, was the truth he had guarded for me. His voice carried across the silence of death, louder than any insult they had ever thrown at me. "No," my stepmother whispered, rising from her chair. "This cannot be right. He promised me. He told me everything would belong to us." Her voice cracked, desperate now. She turned to the lawyer, her calm facade dissolving into fury. "You must be mistaken. This is forged. This is a trick, mister." Whitaker's reply was unshakable. "This document was signed in my presence. Your husband's wishes are clear, and the law is not swayed by denial." Her children began to argue at once, their voices overlapping in a desperate chorus. "He loved us too. We were his real family. She is lying. She does not deserve this." Their accusations filled the room, but none of it mattered. The truth stood like a stone wall against their storm. I felt the heat of tears rising, but I refused to let them fall. I lifted my head, meeting their frantic eyes with a steadiness I had never felt before. This was not the trembling girl they had mocked and dismissed. This was my father's heir, sitting in the chair he had chosen for me. The lawyer's voice cut through their protests. "The estate is hers." Effective immediately, silence followed, heavy and absolute. The family that had mocked me, that had pushed me to the curb with laughter, now stared at me with horror dawning in their eyes. For the first time, they saw me not as an outsider, but as the rightful owner of everything they had tried to steal. Would you call it revenge to watch those who erased you crumble under the truth? Or would you call it justice when your father's final words restore the place they tried to take away? The silence stretched, broken only by the faint hum of the grandfather clock. My stepmother's lips parted as if to speak again, but no sound came out. Her eyes darted to her children, searching for support. But they avoided her gaze. The weight of the will pressed down on them all, undeniable, unshakable. I rose slowly from my chair. My legs trembled, but my voice did not. "You told me I was not family," I said, each word measured, deliberate. "But my father's voice is louder than your lies. He chose me, not you." Her daughter flinched as if struck. Her son's bravado melted into silence. My stepmother's painted face cracked, her smile collapsing into something bitter and unrecognizable. Mr. Whitaker slid a folder across the desk toward me. "These documents transfer control immediately. You will have full authority over the estate." His tone was professional, but there was a softness in his eyes, as though he had waited a long time to see justice delivered. I picked up the folder and held it close, feeling the weight of it in my hands. Every injustice, every whispered insult, every cruel smile, they all seemed to dissolve in that moment. The power she had used to humiliate me was gone, swept away by the truth my father had left behind. My stepmother finally found her voice, trembling and hollow. "This is unfair. You will regret this." I met her stare without flinching. "No," I said quietly but firmly. "The only thing I regret is ever letting you make me feel small." The room was still. For the first time, I felt taller than them all. They had tried to erase me, to reduce me to nothing. But here I stood, calm and unbroken, holding the proof that I had always belonged. Would you smile in that moment, seeing your enemies silenced by the very truth they feared? Or would you walk away, knowing their collapse was punishment enough? When I stepped out of the lawyer's office, the late afternoon sun had already dipped low, painting the street in amber light. The world outside bustled on as if nothing had changed. But for me, everything had shifted. The folder in my hands felt heavier than gold. It was more than paper. It was vindication. It was belonging. It was my father's last embrace, carried not in arms, but in ink. Behind me, I could still hear faint echoes of their voices, hushed now, no longer triumphant. My stepmother did not follow me out. Neither did her children. They had come in ready to claim victory, and they were leaving with silence clinging to them like ash. That silence was louder than any apology they could ever offer. I paused at the curb, the city air cool on my face. For the first time in years, I did not feel like an outsider standing on the edge of someone else's home. I felt rooted. My father had given me back my place. He had given me back myself. In the days that followed, I heard rumors. Neighbors whispered about the scene in the lawyer's office. Old family friends sent messages saying they always knew I was the one my father trusted most. A few even apologized for staying silent when they had seen how I was treated. My phone lit up with hesitant texts from relatives who had never spoken to me directly before. "We are proud of you. We are sorry we did not see sooner." But I did not need their validation anymore. I walked into the house that was once filled with their laughter, and for the first time, it was quiet. The furniture, the photographs, the walls themselves seemed to breathe differently. I ran my hand along the banister, tracing the very same spot my father once polished with a rag. This house was not theirs to take. It never had been. I stood in his study. The scent of old books, and with still lingering, I whispered into the empty room, "Thank you, Dad." My voice cracked, but it carried strength too. He had buried me once in silence, but now he had raised me in truth. And as I closed my eyes, I understood something. They had tried to erase me, to bury me in their lies. But the truth had dug me out. They buried me once. This time, I am standing tall with the truth my father left behind.